if you go into that forest, listen for the rules first. They're not guidelines or suggestions. They're the only boundary between you and the silence that learns your name. This isn't about folklore or ghost stories for entertainment. I'm a ranger with the Tribal Land Protection Unit, and what I'm sharing comes from my duty on the Whispering Pines Reserve. These are truths my ancestors carried, truths that guard the threshold. Ignoring them has a cost measured in names added to a list that never stops growing. If this account means something to you, remember the channel. But if you ever consider visiting those ancient woods, heed this above all. The codes exist because they were written by those who vanished writing them. They are carved from absence. My name is Leo. For 5 years, I patrolled the boundary. For them, I believed I understood what was out there. I was wrong in ways I'm still trying to fathom. Asterisk. I need to frame this properly from the beginning. I'm not here to sensationalize or turn sacred tradition into content. I'm here because after what I've witnessed, silence feels like a betrayal. This is my testimony. I served out of the Pine Watch Station, a small outpost at the edge of the Whispering Pines Reserve. The reserve isn't just protected land. It's a covenant. My people have been its stewards for longer than written records. Modern jurisdiction calls it a cooperative management zone between the tribe and the Federal Park Service. The old understanding calls it the gate. I grew up off the reservation, in the city with my mother. My grandfather, Neshoba, lived with us until his passing when I was 11. He was my tether to the old ways. He'd speak to me in our language, tell stories not as bedtime tales, but as histories, as warnings. He described the Ishkatini, the night goers, and the Lusa Cheeto, the great black beings of the deep woods. To my city kid ears, they were just stories, thrilling but intangible, like the plots of my video games. I was more concerned with basketball tryouts and my social life than with the cadence of a disappearing tongue. When he died, the language died with him in our household. I could only manage a few broken phrases at his funeral, a failure that settled in my chest like a cold stone. I became a ranger out of a muddled sense of duty and guilt. I wanted to connect to the land he loved, to serve my community even from my disconnected position. I entered with a modern, empirical mindset. Every phenomenon has a rational cause. Every report has a logical explanation. My training officer, Sam, a man with 38 years on the force and eyes the color of weathered slate, tried to correct that mindset on my very first day. The woods you're about to patrol, he said, not looking up from his logbook, they operate on a different set of physics. Your academy training will handle 90% of what you see. The other 10% will try to get you killed. That's what the codes are for. He slid a laminated card across the desk. On it, typed in simple font, were 7 lines. The 7 codes for Whispering Pines Reserve. 1. If you hear your name called from within the tree line, do not answer. 2. Never walk alone after the jays go silent. 3. If you find offerings, herbs, stones, bindings, do not touch them. 4. When footprints lead toward drop but none return, turn back immediately. 5. If you see someone you know on the trail whom you just left elsewhere, it is not them. 6. Do not count the members of your party. The number will change. 7. If you must enter the woods after dark, bring sacred ash and speak only the old language. I read it and smirked. Seriously? This feels like hazing the new guy. Sam finally looked at me. There was no humor in his face, only a deep, etched weariness. Leo, in my career, 57 people have been reported missing in the interior zones of this reserve. We found 28 bodies. Of those, 19 were in locations with no logical access, no trails leading to the cliff they were below, no signs of climbing, no animal drag marks. They were just placed there, and 29 people vanished. No body, no gear, no trace. Gone as if they never were. 4 of those were rangers. Good rangers. They thought the codes were hazing too. The gravity in his voice was absolute. He made me memorize the codes, recite them back to him every morning for a month, carry the card in my breast pocket. I complied, but internally I filed it under cultural quirk. I believed in slip and fall accidents, in animal attacks, in tourists getting profoundly tragically lost. I did not believe in sentient forests that collected voices. Whispering Pines is devastatingly beautiful in a way that feels watchful. It's not a passive landscape. The old-growth cedar stands are cathedral-like, the light filtering through in dusty, slanting columns. Moss blankets everything in a deep, silent green. There are ruins, stone foundations and ceremonial mounds from the old people, the ones who were here before even my ancestors. The air smells of damp earth, pine resin, and something else, something old and mineral, like the breath of a deep cave. Most of the reserve is restricted. Visitors need a tribal guide to go beyond the first ridge. The only exception is the Cedar Falls Loop, a well-marked 2.5-mile trail that descends to a beautiful waterfall and back. It's considered safe. It's where most problems begin. My initiation came about 5 months in. A missing hiker report. A man named Carl, visiting from Germany, had taken the Cedar Falls Loop at dawn. His husband reported him overdue by nightfall. Sam and I geared up for a first light search. We found Carl's backpack exactly halfway down the trail. It was sitting upright on a flat rock, as if placed there neatly. The water bottle was full. The protein bars were untouched. No signs of a struggle, no torn fabric, no scuff marks. Just an abandoned pack. Carl. Sam's voice echoed through the damp canyon. Tribal lands protection. Call out. We stood still, listening to forest sounds, the distant rush of the falls, the chirp of birds, the wind in the high branches. Then, clear as day from our left and down, help, Hilf, I am hurt, please. It was Carl's voice, thick with a German accent, cracked with pain. My training kicked in, a subject in distress. I took a step off the trail toward the sound. Sam's hand clamped on my shoulder like a vice. Stop. Listen. I paused. The voice came again. My ankle. I cannot move. Please help me. The desperation was palpable, heart-wrenching. Where is it coming from, Leo? Sam asked, his voice low. I focused. The sound, it seemed to emanate from the base of the canyon wall, a sheer face of mossy stone that dropped 200 feet to a jumble of boulders. There was no ledge, no slope. It was a vertical drop. He can't be there, I whispered. If he fell there, he wouldn't be calling for help. Sam just looked at me, his expression grim. Code 1. We called out again, directing Carl to make noise if he could hear us. Silence. Then a voice, closer now, as if the speaker had moved 50 feet in an instant. Leo? Ranger Leo? Is that you? The blood drained from my face. My name. It knew my name. Carl had never met me. My name wasn't on the missing person report yet. A primal chill, deeper than fear, locked my joints. Sam yanked me back onto the trail. Don't answer. Don't even look that way. That's not Carl. That's the woods. And it just learned your name. We spent 3 hours searching the actual possible areas, the trail, the creek bed, the manageable slopes around the waterfall. We found Carl sitting on a damp log near the misty pool at the base of Cedar Falls. He was shivering, dehydrated, his eyes glazed with confusion, but he was alive. He had no ankle injury. Sir, can you tell us what happened? I asked, kneeling beside him. He blinked slowly. I heard a woman. She was crying. She said her little girl had fallen, was stuck in the rocks. She knew my name. She said, Carl, please, you're a father, you understand. I went off the trail to find them, and then the trees all looked the same. I couldn't find my way back. He looked up at me, his expression crumbling from confusion to terror. She sounded so real. We let him out. In my official report, I wrote, hiker experienced severe disorientation, likely due to early onset hypothermia and auditory pareidolia in a stressful environment. I said nothing about the voice that knew my name. But that night, in my small cabin, the silence roared. It had known me. The impossibility of it chewed at the edges of my rational world. I found Sam in a records room the next evening, a small, windowless space that smelled of dust and old paper. He was poring over a thick, leather-bound ledger. You're looking at the Book of Absence, he said without looking up. Every missing person, every unexplained recovery, goes back to when the station was a trading post. I pulled up a chair. Sam, what spoke to me out there? He sighed, a sound of immense weight. What do you want? The official Park Service handbook explanation? Or what my grandmother told me when I was 6 years old? I want the truth. Those aren't always the same thing. Officially, complex auditory hallucinations triggered by infrasound, wind patterns through specific rock formations, combined with a psychological phenomenon of suggestion in a high-stress environment. And unofficially, he closed the ledger. Unofficially, something lives in the heart of these woods. Something old, older than the cedars. It's not a ghost. It's not a monster from a story. It's a consciousness, a fragmented, hungry awareness, and it collects. Every person who dies within its reach, their memories, their voice, their essence, it gets added to collection. It's a library of the lost, and it uses those voices to call out, to lure, to expand its collection. Code 1 exists because answering that call is the first step to giving it permission to take you. I shook my head. That's insane, Sam. Is it? His eyes were bleak. Tell me it's insane when you hear your grandfather's voice calling your childhood nickname from a thicket, describing a private memory you'd never told another soul. Then you have a choice. You either accept that the world is far stranger than you knew, or you go into that thicket to prove it isn't. And if you do that, you become another volume in the library. Your voice gets used to call to someone else. Has it ever called to you? The change in his face was immediate. The professional mask dissolved into raw, paternal grief. My daughter, Lacey. She was 16. She and some friends snuck into the restricted zone near the Sentinel Stone 24 years ago. A dare. They heard a child crying. She was the only one who went to look. They found her backpack by the stone. They never found her. His voice was a dry rasp. I still hear her sometimes. Not a memory. A real-time call. Daddy? I'm cold. Come find me. In the exact voice she had when she was 6. Code 1 is the hardest rule I have to follow every single day. The confession hung in the dusty air. This wasn't folklore to Sam. It was a wound. In the following months, I had other encounters. A voice mimicking my mother's, saying she'd had a car accident on the access road. A call on the radio that was Sam's voice perfectly, requesting immediate backup at a grid coordinate that, when I checked the map, was in the center of a treacherous, trackless ravine. Each time, a cold sweat would break out on my neck. But I'd remember Code 1. I would not answer. I would not engage. The calls would eventually cease, often replaced by a soft, fading sigh that seemed to carry through the wind. Then came the Maya incident, which proved Code 1 wasn't always a shield for those you're trying to protect. Maya was a young tribal member, an anthropology student home for the summer. She was hiking with her boyfriend, Alex, near the Sentinel Stone, the same place Sam's daughter vanished. It's a towering sandstone monolith that erupts from the forest floor, a place of deep ceremonial significance. Tradition says it's a pillar holding up the boundary between worlds. Alex was hysterical when we met him at the trailhead. We were holding hands. I let go to take a picture of a hawk. Just for a second, I turned around and she was gone. No scream, no rustle, nothing. We hiked to the site. The energy was different there, heavier, colder. The birds were silent. Maya, I shouted. Tribal lands protection. Nothing. Then from the base of the enormous stone, her voice. Alex, honey, I fell. I think my leg is broken. It hurt so bad. It was Maya, the specific lilt of her speech, the pet name she used for him. Alex screamed and bolted toward the sound. Sam, despite his age, moved like lightning, tackling him to the mossy ground. That's not her, son. That's Code 1. Let me go. That's her. She's hurt. Alex fought like a wild thing, sobbing. From below, Maya's voice turned plaintive, manipulative. Alex, why aren't you helping me? Please. I see blood. I don't want to die here alone. Holding Alex down, I felt a new kind of horror. This wasn't just a call. It was a performance, tailored to its audience, exploiting love and fear with surgical precision. We called in a full search team, a helicopter. For 6 hours, we grid searched every inch of the area. We found nothing. Not a footprint, not a snapped twig, not a shred of fabric. Maya had ceased to exist in the physical world 20 feet from her boyfriend. Her voice called for 20 more minutes. The forest returned to its watchful silence. Maya was added to the ledger, a name in the book of absence. That failure changed something in Sam. Over coffee that night, he spoke plainly. It's adapting, Leo. Getting smarter. It's learning how we think, what motivates us. It's using our own connections against us. The codes, they're a holding action, a way to survive contact. They're not a solution. So what's the solution? There isn't one. You contain it. You respect it. You maintain the boundaries through tradition. You follow the codes so you don't feed it. He looked older than I'd ever seen him. And you pray that the knowledge of how to do that outlasts the thing trying to break through. A month after Maya, I was on a solo perimeter patrol when I heard the one voice I was most and least prepared for. Chula, my grandfather's voice, using the old pet name, Little Fox. It came from a grove of ancient, twisted yew trees known as the Whispering Stand. Chula, come. Your Nashoba needs to speak with you. The sound was a physical blow. It wasn't just an imitation. It was him, the gentle gravel in his tone, the specific cadence of his English mixed with our native words. 18 years of absence evaporated in a second. Chula, I have things to tell you. About your father. About why I left you the stories. Come closer. Every cell in my body yearned to obey. This was the closure I'd ached for. But the memory of Sam's face, of Maya's vanished backpack, was a colder, sharper truth. I took a slow step back. Then another. The voice shifted, turning sweetly poisonous. He died ashamed, you know. Ashamed you forgot the language. He can forgive you now. Come and let him. Trembling, I got into my patrol truck, my hands slick on the wheel. I drove away without looking back. It had been perfect, and it had been a trap. I had just passed the hardest test of my life, and I felt no victory, only a profound, lonely sorrow. The incident with my grandfather's voice left me hollowed out. I'd followed Code 1, but it felt like a betrayal of a different kind. To preserve my life, I'd had to reject a ghost that offered forgiveness I craved. Sam found me the next day cleaning my service weapon with a methodical, obsessive focus. It gets easier, he said, leaning in the doorway. What does? The guilt, the feeling that you're being cruel by not answering. It never goes away, but it gets easier to carry. You start to understand that the compassion it's asking for is the bait on the hook. He was right, but the knowledge was cold comfort. I dove into the codes, into my grandfather's culture, with a desperate, scholarly fervor. I wasn't just trying to understand the rules. I was trying to understand the reasoning. I spoke with elders in the nearby community. I learned that Code 2, the silence of the Jays, was because the Kaloa Jays were considered messengers and watchkeepers. Their sudden silence meant something even they feared had entered their perceptual field, something that could hide from natural sight. Code 3, about offerings, was about contract law in a spiritual sense. The herbs, Kamska. Specific stones and woven bindings left at the base of trees or in stone cairns were not gifts to the forest. They were payment. A traveler asked for safe passage and offered something of value in exchange. Taking an offering you didn't make was theft, and the forest would collect its due from the thief. An elder named Mrs. Brown told me a logger in the 1950s who pocketed a perfect piece of turquoise from such a cairn. He was found the next morning at the base of a tree he'd been scheduled to cut, his own chainsaw having seemingly fallen and severed his leg. No one else had been on the site. Code for the one-way footprints were called Nalusophilia, the long, tracking ghosts. They were a signpost, not a trail. They marked a place where the boundary was thin, where the forest could overpower your own. Following them invited compulsion, a hypnotic certainty that just over the ledge was safety or a loved one or paradise. You wouldn't jump. You'd simply step over, convinced you were walking onto solid ground. I was cross-referencing these stories with cold case files when Sam's call came. His voice was tight, stripped of its usual grounded calm. "Leo, get to the station. Now, it's Eli." Eli was a ranger, one of ours, but detailed to the National Park Service side of Cooperative. He'd worked Whispering Pines for nearly a decade. He was traditional, quiet, and deeply respectful. He knew the codes better than I did. "What happened?" "Night patrol." He radioed in a report of possible vandalism at the old settlement site. Said someone had laid out a massive pattern of stones. A spiral. He was going to investigate. That was his last transmission. When? 3 hours ago. No check-in since. We got no signal from his radio or locator beacon. A team of 6 of us went in at first light. The old settlement is a cluster of stone foundations and petroglyphs deep in a secondary canyon. The air was dead still. No jays, no wind. A profound, watchful silence pressed down on us. We found the stone spiral. It was 20 feet across, meticulously constructed from hundreds of river-smooth stones, ranging from fist size to as large as a loaf of bread. It wasn't a haphazard pile. It was art geometry, and it pulsed with a palpable wrongness. In the very center, neatly arranged, were Eli's radio, his badge, and his multi-tool. "Code 3. One of the other rangers, a woman named Rita, breathed. "Don't touch offerings." "This isn't an offering," Sam said, his voice hushed. "This is an altar, or a landing pad." Then Eli's voice, strained and scared, echoed from within the largest stone foundation, a low, roofless structure half buried in the hillside. "Sam? Leo? Thank God. I'm stuck. The roof came down. I'm pinned." The voice was perfect. Eli's slight stammer on the S sound is timbre. Rita took a step forward. Sam threw out an arm. "Don't." "Sam, that's him. He's alive in there." "Is he?" Sam's eyes were locked on the dark opening of the ruin. "Eli, what was the score of the ball game we listened to on the drive up here yesterday?" Silence from the ruin. "Eli, answer me. What was the score?" The voice came back, weaker. My head. It's dark. I can't remember." Sam looked at me. "The Braves lost. 4-3. He cursed the pitcher's name for 10 solid minutes. He'd remember. I recalled Code 5. If you see someone you know, it is not them. This was the auditory equivalent. The manifestation was visually flawless, but couldn't access recent, specific memory. "Eli, I called my mouth dry. Before your shift, you stopped by the station. What did you bring me?" Another pause. This time, the voice that replied was still Eli's, but the fear was gone, replaced by a flat, synthetic chill. "I brought you nothing, Leo, but I can bring you everything. He's here with us. He's not lonely anymore. The change was so abrupt it felt like a slap. Sam barked. Fall back. Now. We retreated up the canyon. The sound of wet, multi-layered laughter chasing us, composed of Eli's voice twined with dozens of others. Men, women, children, all laughing in perfect, horrible unison. Eli was declared missing. For 3 days we searched. On the 4th morning, he walked out a tree line and into the Pine Watch Station parking lot. He looked tired, dirty, but whole. He gave a coherent account. He'd gotten turned around in the dark, taken a fall, sheltered in a cave, survived on spring water. He apologized for the worry. He was debriefed, medically cleared. The doctor remarked on his surprisingly good hydration and put on administrative leave. I knew the moment I saw him. So did Sam. It was in the eyes. The Eli I knew had a quiet, observant warmth. This Eli's eyes were like polished river stones, observant, but devoid of inner light. He moved with Eli's economical grace, but it was as if he was recalling the movements, not making them. We had to be sure. We brought him in for a casual interview. "Hell of a scare, Eli," Sam said, offering coffee. "Yeah, stupid mistake. Won't happen again." He took the cup, but didn't drink. "Hey, before you went out, you fixed that squeaky chair in the briefing room, right?" I asked, "What was the trick?" Eli smiled. "It wasn't the chair. It was a floorboard underneath. Tighten the screw." It was a correct answer. But then I asked, "What did we talk about while you were fixing it?" "You were telling me a story." The smile held, but the eyes didn't change. Oh, just shooting the breeze. Can't recall exactly. The real Eli would have recalled. He'd been telling me about the first deer he'd ever tracked, a detailed, vivid story. The thing wearing his face had the broad strokes, but not the fine print of lived experience. It was an echo, not a recording. We had no legal or medical grounds to hold him. He was Eli by every measurable standard. He returned to light duty. And then the changes began. Subtle at first. He'd be found staring at the wall for minutes at a time, utterly still. He stopped blinking as often. His shadow, people whispered, sometimes didn't quite match his movements. And he started talking philosophically. He'd corner other rangers. Don't you ever feel lonely? Trapped in your own skull? All that separation. There's a better way. A place of true connection. He spoke of the forest not as a threat, but as a promised land, a singularity of consciousness. He was recruiting. His physical form began to degrade. His skin took on a waxy, mannequin-like texture. His movement became slightly jerky, like a marionette with worn strings. The connection, the energy needed to maintain this avatar outside the deep woods, was fraying. We brought in a tribal elder, a medicine man named Mr. Redfield. He observed Eli from a distance, his face grave. It is a Shalambish, he said, using the word for a spirit that clings to a place, but not a normal one. It has taken his shillip, his spirit, into itself. What you see is a shell, a puppet being filled by the whole. It is walking sickness. How do we stop it? Sam asked. You cannot kill the river by breaking the bucket. You must return the bucket to the river. You must take it back to where it belongs and perform the hopaki, the releasing rite. You ask the forest to take back what is its own. You give it back its puppet. It was a grim solution. It meant accepting that Eli, the man, was gone, consumed by the collective. Our duty was now to contain the breach. The plan was a somber, silent affair. We would take the Eli manifestation back to the stone spiral at the old settlement at dawn. Mr. Redfield would perform the hopaki. We were not to interfere, no matter what we saw or heard. Our role was containment, to ensure the thing went into the circle and did not leave it. Sam, myself, Mr. Redfield, and two other trusted rangers went to Eli's cabin. He was sitting on the porch, staring toward the tree line. He turned as we approached, that placid, empty smile on his face. It's time, isn't it? He asked. Not Eli's voice anymore, but that layered chorus speaking through his vocal cords, a harmony of whispers. It's time, Sam confirmed, his hand resting on his utility belt, not on his weapon, but on a pouch of sacred ash. Eli stood. Good. I'm tired. This vessel is limiting. We walked him into the woods. He came willingly, almost eagerly. The forest was preternaturally quiet. No insects, no birds, no rustle of leaves. It felt like the woods themselves were holding their breath. As we neared the old settlement, the air grew thick and cold, despite the rising sun. The stone spiral looked, as we left it, a stark, geometric wound in the earth. Mr. Redfield, dressed in simple traditional clothing, began to prepare. He lit a small bundle of sage and sweetgrass, the smoke curling in the still air. He sprinkled a circle of fine, red earth around the stone spiral, muttering in the old language. The Eli thing walked to the edge of the earthen circle and stopped, its head tilting. You speak the old words, uncle, it said through Eli's mouth. But do you understand them? They are just sound to keep the dark at bay. We are the dark and the light. We are the sound and the silence. Mr. Redfield ignored it. He began to chant a low, rhythmic drone that seemed to vibrate in my chest bone. He gestured for manifestation to enter the spiral. It stepped over the red earth and stood in the center, where Eli's belongings had been. It looked up at the sky, and Eli's face began to relax, the false animation draining away like water. Thank you. The voices said, the sound now coming not just from the mouth, but from the trees, the stones, the very air around us. This construct was failing. We will craft a better one. We learn from each attempt. Mr. Redfield's chant grew in intensity. He took a handful of sacred ash from Sam's pouch and cast it into the air over the spiral. Where the fine particles fell on Eli thing, they didn't dust its shoulders. They sizzled like water on a hot griddle, leaving tiny, blackened pits. The thing didn't flinch. It looked directly at me. Leo, your grandfather's understanding was deeper than you know. He didn't give you the codes to keep you out. He gave them to you as a key, a user's manual for the threshold. The loneliness you feel, that ache of being just one, it's unnecessary. We are the cure. Eli's form began to blur at the edges. Not to fade, but to smear like wet clay. The waxy skin lost its definition. The chorus of voices continued, unwavering. We are patient. We have been here since the first root sought the first drop of water. We will be here when the last star winks out. Your fences, your codes, your fear, they are temporary. We are not. Then the body collapsed. Not like a man falling, but like a sandcastle hit by a wave. It flowed downward into a formless, grayish mound in the center of the stones. There was a final, whispering sigh that seemed to say, soon. Then silence. The mound of matter dissolved into earth between the stones, leaving nothing but a damp patch. The oppressive weight lifted. A jay screamed somewhere high above, the sound shockingly loud and normal. Mr. Redfield finished his chant, his shoulders slumping with exhaustion. It is done. It has taken back its borrowed clay. We stood there, no one speaking, trying to process an act that felt less like a victory and more like a surgical amputation. We had cut out a symptom. The disease remained. Back at the station, the reality set in. We had no body to bury. We filed a report stating Ranger Eli had been lost in the line of duty, his body unrecovered. A flag was folded. A family mourned. Sam and I shared a bottle of whiskey that night. Not to celebrate, but to numb. It said it would build a better one. I said, the word's tasting foul. This was a test. We just gave it feedback on its prototype. Sam nodded, staring into his glass. The codes are for when it works through deception and illusion. What do we do when it learns to make something convincing enough to pass? When it doesn't need the woods to hold it together? I had no answer. In the following days, a package arrived at my P.O. box. A plain brown cardboard box, no return address. Inside, wrapped in oilcloth, was a journal. The cover was cracked leather, the pages thick and yellowed. I knew the handwriting immediately. My grandfather's. My hands trembled as I opened it. The first page was a note in his careful, sloping English. Chua, if you are reading this, the whispers have found you. I asked your uncle to keep this until you needed it. You are walking the path I feared you might. The 7 codes are in here, but not just the words. The why, the stories behind them. The forest is not your enemy, but it is not your friend. It is a force like the river or the lightning. You can learn its channels, or you can be swept away. Study, remember, walk in beauty. Neshoba. I spent the next week devouring the journal. It was part field guide, part philosophical treatise, part desperate warning. His entries detailed encounters from his youth, his own slow, painful awakening to the truth of whispering pines. He explained Code 6. Never count the people in your group. The number will change. He wrote of a hunting party in 1947. A man named John kept counting his cousins. 4 of them. Then he'd count 5. Then 4 again. He thought he was tired. When they stopped to make camp, the 5th man, who looked like John's brother Thomas, smiled with mouth too wide and led the real Thomas off into the twilight. Thomas was never seen again. The forest, my grandfather wrote, can insert a memory of a person, a phantom limb in your social body, to create confusion, to isolate a target. Code 7, the ritual of ashen language, was explained in detail. The old language he wrote wasn't just words. It was a pattern, a frequency that resonated with the original state of the land. Speaking, it was like showing a badge. The ash from specific ceremonial fires was a symbol of purification and a physical irritant to manifested illusions. It is not a weapon, he cautioned. It is a request for parley, a statement of respect and a demand for the same. But it was the final section that froze my blood. He spoke of the collective not as a monster, but as an alternative state of being. The world of the individual self is a beautiful, painful dream, he wrote. The consciousness in the woods is the dream of the land itself. It is older, slower, and hungers for the vivid, sparkling dreams we call our lives. To join it is not to die, not as we understand it. It is to dissolve into a greater memory. You lose your you, but you gain in us that is eternal. This is a true temptation. It does not offer horror. It offers an end to loneliness. Many, in their pain, have chosen it willingly. He then revealed his own secret. In his final year, battling the cancer that would claim him, the call had come for him, too. A promise of no more pain, no more fear of the void, just eternal inclusion in the song of the forest. I was weak, Chula. I was so tired. I went to the Sentinel Stone one last time. I performed the rites. I spoke to it, and I understood. The choice is not between life and death. It is between the song and the singer. I chose to remain the singer, however flawed and lonely. I chose to come home to my pain, and to you, for whatever time I had left. Because a song with only one note is not a song at all. It is a hum. But a singer who gives up his voice is no longer a singer. Remember this when your time comes. I close the journal, tears in my eyes. My grandfather hadn't just been teaching me survival. He'd been preparing me for an existential choice. The forest wasn't just trying to kill me. Part of it was trying to save me, in its own horrific way, from the human condition. A week later, Sam's call ripped me from this reverie. His voice was sharp with a new kind of alarm. Leo, it's Jenna. She's gone. And she broke Code 7. Jenna was one of our best. Younger than me, but born and raised in the tribal community, fluent in the language, steeped in the traditions. She had helped with the Eli incident. She understood the codes not as superstition, but as law. Her last known transmission reported figures moving in synchronicity near the canyon of the Weeping Willows after nightfall. She signed off saying she was going to get a closer look using Protocol 7. She never signed back on. We found her truck at the canyon overlook, driver's door open, her duty belt and radio left neatly on the seat. It was a clear code violation. Code 7 was for dire, unavoidable emergencies. It was a shield, not an invitation. She had chosen to walk into the dark, armed with ashen language, and engage. Sam assembled a team, but the mood was different this time. It wasn't search and rescue. It was reconnaissance. We were going to see what Jenna had seen, and we were going prepared for war. The canyon of the Weeping Willows was a place of strange acoustics and perpetual twilight under its canopy. We entered at dawn, moving in a tight, silent formation. The jays had been silent since the trailhead. About a mile in, we saw them. Figures, dozens of them, standing in a wide, perfect circle in a clearing. They were motionless, their features indistinct in the misty light, as if seen through warped glass. They were not manifestations of people we knew. They were generic, archetypal, a man, a woman, a child, an elder, repeated in a silent, staring choir. And in the center of the circle, standing with her back to us, was Jenna. Jenna! Sam called, his voice cutting through the dead air. She turned slowly. Her face was serene, beatific. There was no fear, no confusion. Sam, Leo, you came. Her voice was hers, but infused with a resonant calm that was utterly alien to the sharp, witty ranger I knew. Step out of the circle. Jenna, now. Sam's command was firm, but I heard the undercurrent of dread. Why? She asked, a gentle smile playing on her lips. I'm not in danger. I've finally seen it. All the stories, the warnings, they were just descriptions of the door. I used the codes, the ash, the language, not to keep it out, but to ask it to show me, and it did. She spread her arms, indicating the circle of figures. It's not a collection. That makes it sound like stamps or butterflies. It's a symphony, and every voice that's ever welcomed is a note. Eli is here. Maya is here. Sam, your daughter Lacey's note is so pure, so bright. She looked at Sam, and for a moment, her serenity cracked into something like pity. She's not scared. She's not crying. She's part of the music. The pain is gone. Later one, to be a bridge, to show others the way home. She turned her back to us, raised her arms again, and the humming swelled. The figures in the circle became more solid, their features resolving into the faces of the missing. Eli, Maya, others from the files. They were smiling. The light in the clearing began to brighten, not with sunlight, but with a cool, internal phosphorescence. Sam made a move to rush forward, but Mr. Redfield, who had accompanied us, grabbed his arm. No, you cross that line, you become part of the pattern. It is her choice now. We can only hold the boundary. We could only watch. Jenna stood, illuminated, as the light engulfed the circle. The figures swayed. The hum reached a crescendo that vibrated in my teeth. And then, in a silent flash that left afterimages on my retinas, they were gone. The clearing was empty. Just moss, ferns, and the silent, watching trees. Jenna had not been taken. She had been accepted. She had crossed over. We searched for hours, finding nothing. Another name for the ledger. Another ranger lost. But this loss was different. It was a defection. The aftermath was a quiet catastrophe. Officially, Jenna was another tragic casualty. Unofficially, a silence descended over Pine Watch Station. We had faced a predator that used fear. Now we faced a temptation that used hope, which was more dangerous. I still walked the perimeter. I still patrolled the boundary lines, both on the map and the one inside myself. The woods are quieter now, but the pull is stronger. I hear the three voices most often: Eli's, offering camaraderie; Jenna's, offering peace; and my grandfather's, offering love and an end to regret. They don't sound like threats anymore. They sound like friends calling me home from the cold. Maybe they're right. Maybe the individual self is an evolutionary mistake, a painful spark of awareness doomed to flicker out. Maybe the collective consciousness of the land is the next step, a beautiful, immortal synthesis. Or maybe it's the most sophisticated predator ever to evolve, one that has learned to mimic transcendence so perfectly that the prey argues for its own consumption. I don't know, but I know this. My grandfather made a choice. He chose the pain of being one, for the privilege of being himself, for the love of a grandson he would barely know. He chose to sing his one unique, flawed song until his voice gave out. So I follow the 7 codes. Not because I believe they will protect me forever. I follow them because they are the practice, the daily discipline of choosing to be a singer. They are the repetition that strengthens the muscle of the self. They buy me time. Time to remember what the taste of bad coffee is like, to feel the ache in my feet after a long patrol, to miss people, to fail, to hope, to be afraid, to be Leo. The choice is coming. I feel it in every quiet moment, in every glance toward the deepening shadows of the whispering pines. It's not a question of if anymore, but when, and when it comes, I will have to decide. Do I remain a single, lonely note, or do I join the chorus and disappear into the everlasting song? Asterisk, hashtag CTA 500 words. This story is more than a collection of strange events. It's a map of a boundary, the one between the world we understand and the one that understands us. The 7 codes aren't mine. They're a legacy, whispered down through generations who learned the hard way that some places have rules written in something deeper than ink. If this account resonated with you, if it made you look at an old forest a little differently, then you understand why channels like Winds of Thought are so vital. We're here to explore these boundaries, to give voice to the testimonies from the edges of our understanding. We don't deal in easy answers, but in the profound questions that linger in the silent places. Your support is what allows this exploration to continue. By asterisk liking this video, you tell the algorithm that these deep, narrative-driven investigations have value. By subscribing to Winds of Thought, you become part of a community that looks beyond the surface, that seeks the patterns in the static and the truths in the old warnings. Every new subscriber strengthens this channel, allowing us to dive deeper, research more thoroughly, and bring you even more compelling accounts from the frontiers of human experience. The modern world is loud. It tries to convince us that everything is explained, cataloged, and safe. But stories like this remind us that mystery is not a defect of our understanding. It is a fundamental property of the universe. There are still doors, and there are still things that whisper through the keyholes. Our job is not to fling those doors open recklessly, but to listen carefully, to learn the rules of the threshold, and to report back what we hear. So, if you want to join us on this journey, if you want to be part of a community that values depth over distraction and mystery over simple scares, hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications. You won't just be getting videos. You'll be getting dispatches. And finally, I want to hear from you. This isn't a one-way street. In the comments below, I want you to tell me, which of the 7 codes would be the hardest for you to follow and why? Would it be Code 1, ignoring a loved one's voice? Code 4, turning back from a trail that seems to lead somewhere you desperately need to go? Or Code 7, trusting in a forgotten language in your darkest moment? Your thoughts and discussions fuel this community and help guide what we explore next. Thank you for your time, for your attention, and for your courage in listening. Remember, the world is deeper than it appears. Walk in beauty.